Okay, so I bet you're here because you want to really level up those English conversation skills, right? Sound more natural, more like you've been hanging out with native speakers for years.
That's a great goal to have.
It is. And luckily, we found this awesome podcast called Learn English in 3 Hours, All You Need to Master English Conversation. And honestly, it's packed with stuff you can use immediately.
I agree. It is.
You know how language learning can be like super dry sometimes?
Oh, for sure.
This one felt different. It felt really practical. What were some of the things that stood out to you?
I think what really impressed me was how they dug into those like subtle things that actually make you fluent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they went way beyond just the normal grammar stuff.
Yeah.
Like they emphasized pronunciation, but not just any pronunciation, like being understood clearly.
Right.
Building your vocabulary in a smart way, and even how to kind of navigate like the cultural side of conversations.
Yeah, I loved that too. And they even tackled those like classic tricky English sounds, you know, like the short I versus a long I.
Oh, yeah.
Ship versus sheep, which I know, depending on your native language, that can be a real like brain twister. But they had some really cool techniques, like really focusing on like where your tongue is, how the air is flowing.
Like having a little pronunciation coach right there with you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was so smart because it lets listeners test themselves right away.
Oh, absolutely.
They can actually hear the difference and then try and make those sounds.
That self-awareness is huge.
Totally. And they didn't just stop at the vowels.
Right.
They got into the dreaded "the" sound.
Oh, yeah.
Which I know is a tongue twister for so many people.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, the classic R versus L confusion. Let's be honest. That can lead to some pretty funny misunderstandings.
And definitely, yeah.
If you're not careful. But yeah, they gave some great advice on that, on how to really differentiate.
And I think what was really smart is that they said, you know, you don't have to sound exactly like a native speaker.
Right.
It's more about being clear.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about being understood,
Yeah.
Communicating effectively.
Yeah, just getting your message across with confidence.
For sure.
Now, another thing I thought they did a really great job with was vocabulary building.
Right.
And again, it went way beyond just saying, okay, memorize this giant list of words.
Right.
They had this concept of learning words in families, you know, like happy, unhappy, happiness. It was so smart.
Yeah. It's brilliant.
You're not just memorizing a single word.
Right.
You're actually like learning the whole concept, you know?
It helps you like grasp the nuances of the meaning.
Yes.
It's like you're building like this web of related terms.
I love that analogy.
Helps you expand your vocabulary.
Yeah, it's not just like adding more words.
Right.
It's like you're actually getting a deeper understanding.
This is a deeper understanding for sure.
Of how those words all connect. I love that.
Yeah.
And they also had this idea of like exploring synonyms and antonyms.
Right.
Which again can really add some spice.
Yeah, it does.
To your conversations.
It does.
It's like instead of always saying big, you could say enormous, massive, like colossal, you know.
It makes you sound more interesting, for sure.
And it's just, yeah, it's just more expressive. It's more interesting.
Like you're painting with words.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Okay, but here's where it gets really, really cool.
All right.
They actually did a mock restaurant ordering scene, like a full-on role play.
Wow, that's cool.
It's so brilliant.
It is.
Because it shows how all these pronunciation tips, the vocabulary, actually work in a real-world situation.
Right, like in action.
Yeah, like you can actually hear it.
Yeah.
And I think for the listener, too, that's huge.
Yeah.
Because it makes you think, okay, what are the situations where I need to practice?
Exactly. Like, how do I apply this in my own life?
Yeah.
It takes it from theory to practice.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. They're basically giving you, like, this toolbox to navigate the world, you know?
It's like a roadmap.
Yes, exactly.
To better communication.
Okay. So they also, and I really appreciated this, they took the time to address some of those like classic grammatical errors.
Okay.
That English learners often make.
Like tense confusion.
Yeah, tense confusion, missing articles, you know, things like that. But what I thought was so smart was that they didn't just point out the mistake.
Right.
They explained why.
I like that.
Yeah.
Because understanding the why is huge.
Oh, it is. It is.
Because then it helps you avoid making those mistakes again.
Yeah, like you're not just memorizing a rule. You're actually like getting it, you know?
Absolutely.
And so, for example, they talked about how a lot of learners will say, I go to school yesterday.
Yeah.
Because that might be the correct word order in their native language.
Right.
But then the podcast took the time to actually explain the English tense system.
It's so smart.
And show why that structure doesn't work.
That's really helpful.
It's really helpful. It's like they're giving you the keys to unlock like how the English language works.
The inner workings.
Yes, exactly. And speaking of unlocking things, they had some, I thought, really great tips for making language learning fun.
Oh, for sure.
Because honestly, sometimes it can feel like a chore.
Oh, absolutely.
It can be.
It can.
And that's not how you want it to be.
No. You want to enjoy it.
You want to enjoy it. So they recommended watching movies and TV shows, which I can personally vouch for.
Me too.
That helps so much. First with the subtitles, and then gradually you kind of wean yourself off the subtitles as you get more comfortable.
It's amazing how much you can pick up.
You really do. It's like you start to pick up on the natural rhythms.
The expressions.
The
cultural nuances.
And plus, it's just entertaining.
Exactly.
So it's a win-win.
It is.
Yeah.
And then by taking away the subtitles, you're kind of forcing yourself to rely more on your listening, right?
Right.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
In real-world fluency.
Totally. They also suggested listening to music.
Oh, of course.
In English and singing along. Which, again, I think is such a fun, like, sneaky way to practice your pronunciation, practice your rhythm.
It's like it gets into your brain.
It does. It does. And then, of course, they emphasized finding conversation partners because at the end of the day,
it's crucial.
It's the best way to practice.
There's really no substitute for it.
There isn't. So whether that's like a language exchange partner or a tutor or just, you know, a friend who's fluent, those interactions are where the magic happens.
Absolutely. It's where you put everything into practice.
Yeah, exactly.
And you actually get to test your fluency.
Yeah.
Give feedback.
Yeah. And what I thought was interesting was that they didn't explicitly talk about how mastering conversation skills can actually make you more confident in other areas of your life.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I think that's a really important connection.
It's true.
Don't you think?
It's almost like it unlocks a part of you.
It does.
That you can apply to other things.
And it's almost like a domino effect, right? The more you practice speaking, the less you're afraid of making mistakes.
For sure.
And so then you feel more comfortable expressing yourself.
Yeah.
And then that confidence just kind of bleeds into other areas.
Yeah.
So like maybe it's at work.
Yeah.
You're more willing to take on that project or, you know, start that creative hobby you've always wanted to do.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're just more at ease in social situations. You know what I mean?
It's amazing how those things connect.
It really is. It's like, it's so much more than just learning the words. It's really about like personal growth.
Yeah.
Cultural exploration.
It is, yeah.
And, you know, just like opening yourself up.
Right.
To a whole new world.
To all these new possibilities.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it is amazing how language learning and personal growth kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And speaking of pushing boundaries, the podcast also spent some time talking about like actually putting your skills to use, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Finding those conversation partners to like solidify everything. I think that's where a lot of people kind of get stuck.
Totally.
It can feel really intimidating to put yourself out there when you're not totally confident yet.
Oh, absolutely. I've been there. It's like you spend all this time studying grammar and vocabulary, and then the idea of actually speaking with someone, it's just like nerve-wracking.
Right. Like your heart starts racing.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Did they have any advice on like how to overcome that hurdle?
They did. One thing they emphasized was that, you know, it's not about finding the perfect conversation partner.
Right.
It's more about finding someone who's supportive and patient and who's willing to help you practice.
Yeah. Someone who will like celebrate your progress, but also gently guide you when you make mistakes.
Exactly.
That's so important to have that kind of judgment-free space.
Absolutely.
Did they mention any practical ways to actually find these awesome conversation partners?
They did. They suggested checking out language exchange apps and websites,
Okay.
which honestly, I've used a bunch of them, and they're really helpful. I mean, there's so many out there now.
I bet.
And they connect you with people from all over the world
That's so
who
cool.
are either learning English or want to learn your native language.
It's a win-win for everybody.
It is. It is.
Oh, I love that. It's like a built-in cultural exchange.
It is.
You get to practice your language skills, but you're also learning about another culture.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Did they have any other suggestions for how to find conversation partners?
Yeah, they also mentioned joining English conversation groups or clubs.
Okay.
I actually used to be part of one in my city.
Oh, cool.
And it was so much fun. We would just meet at this like cozy little cafe once a week
Nice.
and just chat about anything and everything in English.
That's awesome.
It was just like a really relaxed, informal setting where you could, let loose and practice without feeling self-conscious.
I love that. Did you find that it helped you improve your conversation skills?
Oh, definitely. I think it especially helped me get comfortable with like different accents and speaking styles.
Oh, right. Because in the real world, you're not always going to be talking to someone with perfect textbook English.
Exactly. You're going to hear slang, regional dialects, all sorts of rhythms and intonations.
Which honestly is what makes conversation so interesting.
It does. It really does.
So let's say you found yourself a conversation partner,
Okay.
either online or in person. What are some things you can do to like really make the most of those interactions?
That's a good question. They had some good tips for that too. One thing they really emphasized was setting clear goals and expectations from the start.
Okay, that makes sense. Be intentional about it.
Yeah. So like being on the same page about what you both want to achieve from the conversation.
Right. So like, are you trying to focus on specific grammar points?
Exactly.
Or are you trying to expand your vocabulary in a certain area?
Right. Or work on your pronunciation.
Yeah, exactly. So having those clear goals can really help guide those conversations and make them more productive for everyone.
Exactly. It's like having a roadmap.
Yeah, I love that. They also suggested like coming prepared with some topics to talk about.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Because I can imagine if you're nervous or if you feel like you don't know what to say, having a few conversation starters in your back pocket can be a lifesaver.
Oh, for sure.
So what kind of topics did they recommend?
They recommended brainstorming topics that really spark your interest, things that you're passionate about.
Okay, so like your hobbies, your interests.
Exactly. It could be anything like, current events, travel experiences, cultural differences.
I love that. I mean, who doesn't love a good story or a chance to share what they're excited about?
Yeah.
And I imagine that when you're talking about something you're genuinely interested in, the words just flow more naturally.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And you know what else they emphasized? The power of active listening.
Oh, that's huge. It's so easy to get caught up in our own heads, thinking about what we're going to say next.
Right.
But really taking the time to listen to what the other person is saying and then responding thoughtfully, that makes a huge difference.
It does.
It shows that you're respectful.
Yeah.
It builds rapport.
Yeah.
And it helps you really understand their perspective,
Yeah.
which can lead to like much deeper and more meaningful conversations.
And it also helps you learn.
It does.
Because you're paying attention.
You're more engaged.
Yeah.
And they gave some really practical tips for active listening, like making eye contact,
Oh, yeah.
nodding your head, asking clarifying questions.
Right.
It's those little things.
It shows that you're present.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And they also talked about picking up on those nonverbal cues,
Yeah.
facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, because those things can really add like layers of meaning
Oh, for sure.
to what the person is actually saying.
They're communicating so much more than just the words.
Totally. It's funny because active listening, that's not just for language learning.
Yeah.
That's a valuable skill in any conversation.
Absolutely. In life.
Yeah, it's like the foundation
Yeah.
of good communication.
Right.
Okay, so the podcast also tackled another like kind of inevitable part of the conversation process,
Okay.
which is embracing those mistakes.
Oh, yeah, the mistakes.
Oh, I know.
We all make them.
It's so frustrating. It's like you know what you want to say,
Yeah.
but it just doesn't come out right.
It's like there's a disconnect
Yeah.
between your brain and your mouth.
Totally. But they made this great point that mistakes are not only inevitable, they're actually valuable.
They are.
They're part of the process.
They're how you learn.
They really are.
It's how you grow.
So how did they suggest we, approach those mistakes in a more productive way?
Well, they encouraged listeners to, view mistakes as stepping stones. Each mistake is bringing you closer to fluency.
I like that.
And they even recommended asking your conversation partners for feedback directly. Did I use that grammar structure correctly?
Oh, that's smart. Is there a more natural way to say that?
Right.
Yeah. I know it can feel awkward to ask for feedback.
It can be.
But I bet it's so helpful to actually get that input.
It is.
From a native speaker.
It is. It's all about creating that safe learning environment.
Right. Yeah.
Where you feel comfortable asking questions and getting feedback.
Yeah. And what was really cool was they suggested recording your conversations.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Which, I'll be honest, sounds terrifying to me.
I know. It can feel kind of daunting.
Yeah.
But they said it can be really helpful.
Okay.
Of course, like they said, get your partner's consent first.
Right. Of course.
But the idea is that by listening back later,
okay,
you can kind of objectively analyze your own speaking patterns.
Oh, that's interesting.
See where you're stumbling, see how you're progressing over time.
Yeah. It's like you have this record of your progress.
It is.
Like a language learning diary.
It is.
And when you're not in the heat of the moment, you can really be more analytical.
Exactly. You can pick up on those little things you might not have noticed before.
Yeah.
You might realize you're repeating certain words or phrases.
Yeah.
Or you're making the same grammar mistakes.
Yeah.
Or maybe your pronunciation isn't as clear as you thought it was.
Oh, that's really smart. Okay, so this whole conversation about conversation partners got me thinking about another thing they touched on, which was cultural awareness.
Yeah.
Which is something we mentioned earlier, but I think deserves a little more attention.
Absolutely.
Because, they made this really good point that language isn't just about grammar and vocabulary.
No, it's not.
It's about understanding, the cultural context.
The context.
Right. You can know all the right words and phrases, but if you're not sensitive to the cultural norms,
yeah,
you could accidentally say something that's offensive or just totally confusing.
Right.
Right.
You have to be mindful of the culture behind the language.
Yeah.
Because they're so intertwined, you can't separate them.
Totally.
The way we use language is shaped by our values and beliefs and all those things.
Yeah. And so in order to really communicate effectively, we need to have some understanding of those nuances.
We do.
Did they give any examples of how these cultural differences can actually show up in conversation?
They did. They talked about humor, for example.
Okay.
What might be funny in one culture could be offensive or just totally weird in another culture.
Oh, yeah.
And that can lead to some awkward situations.
Misunderstanding.
For sure.
Big time.
And it's not just about jokes.
Right. Yeah.
It's about understanding those unspoken rules of communication.
Yeah. Like how formal to be, how direct to be, even things like eye contact.
Oh, right. Like personal space.
Yeah. All those things can vary so much.
Yeah, they really can. So how do you actually go about developing this cultural awareness? Okay, good question. Well, one of the things they recommended was immersing yourself in English language media.
Okay.
So books, movies, TV shows, music, even podcasts.
Oh, I love that.
It's like you're absorbing the culture.
Right. You're just soaking it up.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not even realizing it.
Yeah. And by seeing how people interact and use language,
yeah,
you can start to pick up on those nuances.
Yeah, totally.
And then they also recommended reading about the cultures of English-speaking countries.
Oh, okay.
Their history, their customs, their traditions.
Yeah, and I think that's where it gets really interesting.
It does.
Because, the English-speaking world is so diverse.
It is.
It's not just one thing. You've got British culture,
Yeah.
American culture, Australian culture, Canadian culture.
And they're all so different.
They are.
And each one has its own unique flavor.
Right. So it's like you're not just learning one language. You're opening the door to like this whole world of cultural experiences.
It's like a passport to the world.
Yes, exactly.
There's so many different ways of life.
And I think that's something this podcast really captured well. It's like mastering English conversation.
Yeah.
It's not just about learning the rules.
No.
It's about embracing this global mindset, expanding your horizons, and connecting with people from all different walks of life.
Absolutely.
It's about seeing the world through a new lens.
It is.
And that's such a powerful experience.
It really is. It really is, you know? And as we've been like going through all these different parts of mastering English conversation, it's kind of amazing how much it reflects personal growth.
Yeah, totally. Like you're always pushing yourself, right?
Right.
Outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Taking on new challenges.
Yeah.
Discovering new things about yourself.
Exactly. And like with any kind of journey of growth, there are going to be like those rough patches.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know, those moments where you feel kind of stuck or frustrated or even a little discouraged.
Totally. Like, I think we've all hit those points where it feels like you're not making any progress no matter how hard you're trying.
Right.
Or you keep making the same mistakes over and over and you're like, come on, brain.
Yeah, exactly.
Get with it.
It can be so tempting to just want to quit.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
And be like, forget it. This is too hard.
Did the podcast talk about that at all? Like those moments of self-doubt? Because I know, at least for me, that's when I'm most likely to give up.
They did. And I thought their advice on that was really good. They reminded listeners that it's normal to feel discouraged sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
But the important thing is to not let those feelings like stop you completely.
Right.
And they emphasize like remembering your why. You know,
oh, yeah.
like that initial spark that made you want to learn English in the first place.
I think it's so easy to lose sight of that.
It is.
When you're in the weeds studying all this grammar. Yeah.
Trying to memorize all these words.
Totally.
Yeah.
So they said, like, take a step back and try to reconnect with that original motivation.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love it.
You know, like, was it a dream of traveling the world?
Yeah.
Was it to connect with people from different cultures?
Oh.
Maybe it was to, like, advance your career.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was just to challenge yourself, to learn something new. Whatever it was, that's your fuel.
Yeah.
That's what's going to keep you going.
That's what's going to keep you going when it gets tough.
Yeah, exactly. And they also talked about celebrating those little wins along the way.
Oh, yeah. That's so important. It's so easy to just be focused on the end goal.
It is.
And kind of forget to acknowledge all the progress you've already made.
Right. So like maybe you finally nailed the pronunciation of that one sound that's been tripping you up.
Yeah.
Or you had a conversation with a native speaker and you didn't feel totally lost. Or you like aced that vocabulary quiz.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, take a moment to celebrate that. Yes. It's like those little wins are the fuel that keeps you moving forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they shared some tips for staying motivated.
Yeah.
Like, you know, setting realistic goals.
Yeah.
Breaking down big tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Ah, that's so helpful. Just to make it feel less overwhelming.
Right.
Especially with something as big as language learning.
Yeah. And like rewarding yourself for your accomplishments.
Yeah,
You know?
totally.
Don't forget to celebrate those milestones.
And making it fun.
Yeah.
Right, because if you're dreading it, it's not going to happen.
Absolutely. So instead of like forcing yourself to study from a textbook all the time, maybe you watch a funny movie in English or listen to some music or try out a new language learning app.
Yeah.
You know, find something that you enjoy.
Find what works for you.
Exactly. And they even suggested like incorporating English into your daily routine in small ways.
Oh, okay.
Like maybe you listen to a podcast in English while you're commuting.
Yeah.
Or you switch your phone settings to English.
Yeah.
Or you follow some English-speaking creators on social media.
Yeah.
Just little things to kind of surround yourself with the language.
I love that. It's like you're constantly creating those little opportunities for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what else I thought was great? they talked a lot about self-compassion.
Oh, that's so important. It's so easy to be super critical of yourself,
It is.
especially when you make mistakes.
Yeah. And like they said, mistakes are going to happen.
They are.
It's part of the process. And it's not a reflection of your worth or intelligence.
Yeah. It's just part of learning.
It is. It is. So they basically said, be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Celebrate the effort that you're putting in
Yeah.
and the courage it takes to embark on this journey.
I love that. It's like you're not just learning a language.
Right.
You're learning to be more patient with yourself.
Right.
More resilient.
Yeah.
More forgiving.
Absolutely.
And those are skills that are useful
They are.
in every aspect of life.
Yeah. And everything. As we wrap up our deep dive into this podcast, I think it was so cool how they really highlighted not just like the how-to of language learning, but also the mindset.
A bigger picture.
Yeah, the bigger picture.
Yeah.
The resilience and just the joy of it all.
Yeah, and that's a message that goes way beyond just learning English.
It does.
I think it applies to anything in life that challenges you,
Absolutely.
to grow and learn.
It's a life lesson. So to our listener out there,
Yeah.
remember to be kind to yourself, celebrate those wins, embrace those bumps along the way, and never forget why you started in the first place.
And remember, we're here to cheer you on every step of the way.
We are. Happy learning, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, keep those conversations flowing.